Thank you for tuning in to Inside Taiwan. I'm Melvin Tan. The ROC government has imposed a second wave of retaliatory measures towards the Philippines government after it was unable to offer a satisfactory apology for the killing of a Taiwanese fisherman by the Philippine Coast Guard. President Ma Ying-jeou criticized the action of the Philippines as a violation of international law that is unacceptable by civilized nations at the 2013 International Law Association, American Society of International Law, Asia Pacific Research Forum. President Ma urges the Philippines government to take full responsibility for its actions.
A second stage of retaliatory measures toward the Philippines government was imposed on May 15th after the government was unable to offer a satisfactory apology for the killing of a Taiwanese fisherman by the Philippines Coast Guard. President Ma Ying-jeou attended the 2013 ILA-ASIL Asia-Pacific Research Forum and said that issuing the 4 demands to the Philippines government was acceptable under international law as the Philippines had violated international law. The president urges the Philippines government to take full responsibility for its actions as it is also a member of the international community. Premier Jiang Yihua also publicly apologized to the country for announcing the implementation of punitive measures towards the Philippines government only after the 72-hour ultimatum deadline had passed. Lawmakers have also criticized Foreign Affairs Minister David Lim for not attending the Forum on International Law at this sensitive time.
On May 15th, Premier Jiang Yihua announced 11 sanctions against the Philippines. And according to Jiang, the Philippines apologized for fatally shooting the Taiwanese fisherman, but failed to take responsibility. Furthermore, it failed to take Taiwan's ultimatums seriously or even respond. If the Philippines continues to procrastinate in responding, a third wave of sanctions may be launched. A 13-member Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Foreign Affairs task force departed for the Philippines on the 16th to conduct its own investigation into the shooting.
On the morning of the 16th, a task force left for the Philippines to investigate the shooting that killed a Taiwanese fisherman. The task force of 13 was formed by the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Coast Guard Administration, Fisheries Agency, Pingdong District Prosecutor's Office, and Criminal Investigation Bureau. One day earlier, the Philippines sent a special envoy, Manila Economic and Culture Office Chairman Amadeo Perez, to Taiwan. Later in the day, Philippine President Benigno Aquino III expressed regret over the accidental incident. As these actions failed to meet Taiwan's expectations, Premier Jiang Yihua announced a second wave of 8 sanctions in the evening, including a red travel alert for the Philippines, the suspension of bilateral governmental, economic, and commercial exchanges, the suspension of bilateral fishery cooperation, the suspension of technology research exchange and cooperation plans, the suspension of bilateral airspace negotiations, the suspension of online visa waiver measures for Philippine nationals, and the MND and CJ's military exercises in the South China Sea. In addition, 3 more measures, including the freezing of all Filipino worker applications, went into effect at 10 a.m. on the 15th. According to Jiang, the cabinet will form a cross-ministerial task force to oversee sanctions against the Philippines. Taiwan is also not ruling out a third wave of sanctions if the Philippines fails to respond to Taiwan's 4 demands.
The Ministry of National Defense has dispatched the Kit-class destroyer Ma Gong to protect Taiwanese fishermen. She arrived at Taiwan's temporary enforcement line, located at 20 degrees north latitude at 4 a.m. on Thursday. Then sailed to the waters located at 19 degrees north latitude, 200 nautical miles from the southern tip of Taiwan. This is the furthest south any naval vessel has ever gone.
The Kid-class destroyer Ma Gong set sail from Qijing in the early hours of the morning. The Ministry of National Defense had organized a 2-day, 1-night military exercise to show the government's determination in protecting fishermen in disputed waters. Taking part in the drill are the Navy, the Coast Guard Administration, the Air Force Rescue Team, and Mirage 2000 fighters. The Ma Gong arrived at Taiwan's temporary enforcement line located at 20 degrees north latitude at 4 a.m., then continued sailing to a location 200 nautical miles from Taiwan's southern extremity to give the message that Taiwanese fishermen have the right to fish in a 200 nautical mile economic zone. The Coast Guard's Tainan frigate had already sailed past the temporary enforcement line on May 8th to protect fishermen. The exercise will feature helicopters providing aerial support and life-saving and communication drills, among other events. The vessels will remain in the water off of Bataan Island for 4 hours before returning to Kaohsiung.
The Ministry of National Defense and the Coast Guard Administration have increased military pressure on the Philippines by conducting joint drills to protect Taiwanese fishing boats in the South China Sea. The MND has confirmed that combat vessels have reached the Taiwan-Philippines temporary enforcement line. However, legislators from the opposition party have criticized the joint exercises for not utilizing live ammunition. The MND responded saying that conducting exercises without using live ammunition is sufficient to demonstrate the strength of Taiwan's military.
On May 16th, the Ministry of National Defense and the Coast Guard Administration held joint exercises to protect Taiwanese fishing boats in the South China Sea. According to the Deputy Minister of National Defense, naval vessels passed the Taiwan-Philippines temporary enforcement line on the morning of May 16th. Live ammunition was not used during the joint exercises to protect fishermen as vessels carried out patrols. Legislators from the opposition party have criticized the MND for not using live ammunition in the exercises, as they believe the Philippines will not take Taiwan seriously unless live ammunition is used. The MND believes that holding exercises in the region is sufficient to demonstrate the strength of Taiwan's military even without the use of live ammunition. According to Kuomintang legislator Lin Yufang, issuing a 30-day international notice is required if the MND decides to hold live-fire military exercises. Using live ammunition during exercises in the South China Sea will also make it harder for fishermen to catch tuna in the region. The United States has urged its allies to resolve the dispute after tensions rose between the two countries. Foreign Affairs Minister David Lin has been criticized as being soft in negotiations with the Philippines government, and legislators have even called for Lin to step down. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that its officials will humbly reflect on their actions. Some legislators believe that having officials step down at this critical time will interfere with ongoing negotiations. They recommend conducting a comprehensive review only after negotiations with the Philippines have ended.
On May 15th, Premier Zhang Yihuan announced a second wave of sanctions against the Philippines. According to analysts, the Philippines has a history of backtracking after agreeing to terms. Therefore, protecting Taiwan's fishermen and entering into fishery negotiations remain key.
After a Taiwanese fisherman was shot and killed by the Philippine Coast Guard, Taiwan issued 4 demands and gave the Philippines 72 hours to respond. The demands included a formal apology, compensation, an expedited investigation and bringing the perpetrator to justice, and expedited fishery negotiations. The Philippines failed to respond to Taiwan's satisfaction, and Taiwan launched 3 sanctions, including a freeze on Filipino worker applications, recalling Taiwan's envoy to the Philippines, and calling on the Philippines envoy to Taiwan to return to Manila. According to National Taiwan Normal University Graduate Institute of Political Science Director Wang Guansheng, the sanctions will definitely have an impact. However, the Philippines also has a history of backtracking or changing its mind after agreeing to terms. Wang further said that this could be an opportunity for the government to reassess its South China Sea policies, fisheries protection policies, and fishery rights. Academia Sinica Institutum Jurisprudente Associate Research Professor Fort Liao, meanwhile, believes that suspending economic and cultural exchanges with the Philippines would be detrimental to both sides. If military exercises in the South China Sea escalate to war, both sides could suffer. While it remains to be seen whether bilateral ties can be repaired, resolving fishery rights issues should be a top priority.
Family members of fisherman Hong Shichen were angered following a press conference given by Manila Economic and Cultural Office Taiwan Managing Director and Resident Representative Antonio Basilio. They said that they believe the Philippines lacks sincerity and stressed that if a formal apology is not forthcoming, they will refuse to meet with any Filipino government official.
The family members of fisherman Hong Shichen, who was killed in the Guangdaxing No. 28 incident, had spent the entire day with one eye on the television set. They were waiting for Manila Economic and Cultural Office Taiwan Managing Director and Resident Representative Antonio Basilio to give a press conference and respond to the Taiwan government's 4 requests. They were left furious after the 72-hour ultimatum given to the Philippines expired and there was still no official statement. Although a press conference was finally held at 1 a.m, the family members were dissatisfied with what was said. They also said the government should have launched the retaliatory measures much earlier. The Philippines government had originally planned to send a special envoy to Liu Cho to meet with Hong's family, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs refused to receive him. Hong's family members said that as long as there is no formal apology, they will refuse to meet with all Filipino government officials. They added that Hong had done nothing wrong, and therefore the Philippines government only saying it sympathizes with the situation is hard to accept. When asked whether they will receive any Filipino official who comes to discuss compensation, they said the government will negotiate that.
After the Taiwan government decided to impose sanctions on the Philippines, the Ministry of Education has also decided to freeze funds from the Taiwan Scholarship and the Huayu Enrichment Scholarship that would have gone to Filipino students. Officials have not decided if Taiwan will participate in the 2013 Little League World Series tournament in Manila later in June. And they also have not decided if the Philippines will be invited to participate in the William Jones Cup International Tournament that will be held in Taiwan in July. Ding Shouzhong, the chairman of Chinese Taipei Basketball Association, hopes that politics will not interfere with sports events. He believes that the events will go on as scheduled unless the relationship with the Philippines worsens.
Taoyuan Xinmin Junior High School became the champions of the 2013 Huanan Financial Holdings Little League Baseball Cup after defeating Tainan Municipal Chongming Junior High School 9-4 and qualified to represent Taiwan at the 2013 Little League World Series tournament in the Philippines in June. Officials have yet to decide if Taiwan will boycott the event due to rising tensions with the Philippines. According to the Ministry of Education, the situation will be carefully assessed before officials make a decision on whether or not to participate in the tournament. If relations with the Philippines worsen, Ding Shouzhong will coordinate with government policies and not invite the Philippines to participate in the William Jones Cup International Tournament this year. However, Ding hopes that international politics will not affect sporting events. While a decision has yet to be made on sports, the Ministry of Education has already frozen scholarships that would have been given to Filipino students this year. While the MOE does not urge Taiwanese citizens studying in the Philippines to return, it does advise them to be careful of their personal safety. The National Science Council has also announced the suspension of scientific and technological exchanges that would have allowed Filipino students to intern in Taiwan.
Taiwan froze all Filipino worker applications on May 15th, which will affect an estimated 30,000 individuals per year. And while the move will detrimentally affect certain industries, industry representatives said that their first priority is the nation and they will do their best to support the measure.
The Philippines failed to directly respond to a 72-hour ultimatum from Taiwan, and Premier Zhang Yihua announced on the morning of May 15th a series of sanctions against the Philippines, including the freezing of all Filipino worker applications. According to Council of Labor Affairs Minister Pan Shiwei, there are currently 87,000 Filipino nationals working in Taiwan, which is 20% of the total foreign workforce. While industry representatives say they fully support the move, some employment agencies are expressing concerns about their livelihoods. Apart from freezing labor applications, Taiwan has also launched trade and travel sanctions against the Philippines. As Taiwan has a trade surplus of $6.7 billion with the Philippines, Economic Affairs Minister Zhang Jiazhu says temporarily suspending trade exchanges will have little impact in the short term.
Yeah! 你以为你看着巴黎，你以为你看着东京，你以为这是你第一次看见它。 港，其实它是一座城市。当你看见这个城市，城市也看见你。高雄。
来到幸福农庄，就是实践拥抱大地的心愿。幸福农庄是一个温馨的生活小站，但是它更大的魅力是这里拥有一片广大的稻田。农庄的女主人说，因为女儿的病，才考虑由都市搬迁到乡下，过着务农的生活。但是这样的决定却带来让人惊喜的收获。现在他们更把这样的生活心得分享出来，推荐给大家。
现在已经是做了10年吧。那不过呢，一开始是从女儿的生病，可是越做越了解到农业或者吃的东西，环境对人的健康非常有大的关系，所以我就觉得这个是我一定要做的事情。人类吃的很干净、很健康的东西，当然会健康嘛。那健康的东西是怎么来的？是健康的土地，所以我们跟土地要多多学习。
亲爱的旅客，我们即将抵达台北。
So, what do you want to do when you are in Taipei?
Feel the people, feel the fluid of the city.
また来たよ。台北のもう一人の私、待っててね。
希望今次可以閱讀晒成個台北每一個角落。
哇！你去閱讀，我睇到你 shopping 喎。
Welcome back to Inside Taiwan. I'm Melvin Tan. Each year, around 180,000 Taiwanese tourists vacation in Boracay and Cebu. In recent days, in response to the Guangdaxi No. 28 incident and the red travel alert issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, many travel agencies have cancelled their tours to the Philippines. Customers will be able to receive full refunds after deducting a certain amount of fees, which cannot exceed 5% of the cost of the trip.
The blue skies and white sand beaches of Boracay and Cebu attracted 180,000 Taiwan tourists last year. This year, trips to Boracay and Cebu in June and July are almost fully booked. However, many travel agencies are now canceling their trips to the Philippines following the Guangdaxi No. 28 incident. One travel agency canceled trips for 200 travelers and has received complaints. Meanwhile, organizers of the upcoming 2013 Taipei Tourism Expo have banned tourism authorities and travel agents from the Philippines from participating, and no one at the expo will sell trips to the Philippines. If the red travel alert issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs persists, travel agencies could lose a significant amount of money.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has issued a travel alert on the Philippines, which will result in the cancellation of tours to Boracay and Cebu for over 3,000 tourists. However, due to the fact that planes have already been chartered for the tours, tourists may receive less than 50% of their fees in the refund. Travel agencies are working to negotiate with airline companies.
Travel agencies have been flooded with calls since early morning. People have been calling in asking how to receive refunds for the tour to Boracay that was scheduled for May 18th. While tour fees total 26,000 NT dollars, tourists may receive less than 10,000 NT dollars in refunds. After the government issued a travel alert on the Philippines, tours to the region have been canceled. The Travel Agent Association worries about over 3,000 tourists who have already paid for their ticket and lodging after signing contracts, as they may not receive full refunds. Results will be announced after negotiations are conducted with airlines of the Philippines. According to the Tourism Bureau, travel agencies employ several different methods of payment, which makes it difficult to provide refund information. However, consumers can ask travel agencies to present payment vouchers and appeal to either the Travel Quality Assurance Association or the Tourism Bureau if disputes arise.
The legislature's Economics Committee was scheduled to report on the effects of the devaluation of the Japanese yen on May 16th. But the focus of the session remained on the second wave of sanctions against the Philippines. Economic Affairs Minister Zhang Jiazhu said that all economic and trade exchanges will be suspended for the time being, while Council for Economic Planning and Development Minister Guang Zhongming said freezing Filipino worker applications would be more effective.
As the government launches a second wave of sanctions against the Philippines, both official and non-official bilateral trade exchanges, visits, and events have been suspended or cancelled. In response to calls from one legislator to restrict all imports and exports to the Philippines, Economic Affairs Minister Zhang Jiazhu said halting trade completely would only hurt Taiwan. Taiwan enjoyed a trade surplus of $6.7 billion with the Philippines in 2012, which is not necessarily high. Therefore, Council for Economic Planning and Development Minister Guan Zhongming believes freezing Filipino worker applications would be more effective. During the session, lawmakers also expressed displeasure over the prices of imported Japanese goods remaining high, despite the Japanese yen depreciating by more than 30% since Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took office. The Fair Trade Commission says that it has not discovered any evidence of price collusion, while the Ministry of Economic Affairs is not ruling out the possibility of meeting with trading companies.
For the 6th year, a welfare foundation and a company have teamed up for the charity program, the Mercedes-Benz Star Dream and Eat an Elephant project. The program provides students living in rural areas with nutritious breakfasts, as well as free lessons after school to help them realize their potential. Over the years, 20,000 students have benefited, and even more will be able to realize their dreams following this year's event.
Children from a church choir sing the song, "My Future is Not a Dream." These children, who hail from Hualien, are all beneficiaries of the Mercedes-Benz Star Dream and Eat an Elephant Project charity program. When they first formed the choir in their church, they only had a piano as accompaniment. Now they also have drums, guitars, and other instruments, allowing them to learn more about music as well as gain self-confidence. In previous years, the charity program had provided 20,000 students living in rural areas with nutritious breakfasts and after-school lessons to help them find their interests. The program is now in its 6th year. On May 15th, during a promotional event, the Star Talent Plan was announced. The purpose of the plan is to help children develop so that they will be able to realize their dreams.
Ye Song, a Hakka poet from Hualien, often writes poems, prose, and children's literature about everyday life in Hakka communities. In the past, people have only been able to enjoy Ye's timeless poems through reading his collection of poems. Recently, calligrapher Zhang Xiaoju collaborated with the poet to write over 40 of Ye's poems in various fonts. The pair hopes to demonstrate the deepness of Hakka literature through merging poems with calligraphy.
Hakka poet Ye Song recites his work titled Under the Tongue Blossom Tree, which illustrates the bond between tongue blossom trees and the Hakka people in everyday life. In the past, people were only able to appreciate Ye's poems through reading his collection of poems. However, through the help of Hakka calligrapher Zhang Xiaoju, Ye's timeless poems have been transformed into art. Zhang loved painting and calligraphy starting at a young age. Over the years, she became proficient in writing using a variety of fonts. She was deeply moved by Ye's poem, titled Hometown River, and started depicting the mood of the poem through calligraphy. The collaborative works produced by Ye and Zhang will be on display at Hualien County's Hakka Culture Center. Through merging poems with calligraphy, the pair is able to show the love between the Hakka people, their land, as well as their language.
The Ministry of Culture conceived of the Artsland program to bring art to remote parts of Taiwan. And this year's event recently opened at National Hsinchu Living Arts Center, with 11 art groups taking part in 16 public exhibitions and performances. The Nantou County Cultural Affairs Bureau and Caotun Township Office have also helped organize a concert tour featuring the Hsinchu Wind Orchestra and singer Zhang Ying, and that will kick off at the end of May at Xuguang Senior High School.
The audience is captivated by the rich tones of singer Johnny Yin's voice. At the end of the month, Yin will embark on a concert tour with the Hsinchu Wind Orchestra. To promote the arts in rural areas, the Ministry of Culture has organized a series of grassroots touring performances. Shuttle buses will be provided to bring residents of remote areas to performance venues. As the number of seats at the venue in Caotun Township is limited to 1,500, however, those interested in attending the concert should visit the Caotun Township office to pick up free tickets to the event as soon as possible.
有风师爷，台南安平有剑师，郑成功打败荷兰人，军队驻扎安平，将士把刀剑插入四面盾牌挂在墙上，威风凛凛。安平居民争相仿效，引以祈福、辟邪、镇煞。安平是剑师的故乡，也是在地文化创意产业。您瞧，现今留存这几支有特色的剑师，加上想象创作出来的图样，是不是很有趣、很可爱呢？来到安平最有趣的文化之旅，就是大家一起来寻宝，找找看小剑师到底在哪里呢
？Tourism industry has been one of the bright spots in Taiwan's economy in recent years. In fact, there will be over 8 million foreign visitors and tourists to Taiwan this year. On the next Taiwan Outlook, we will have a conversation with Mr. Patrick Lin, who's the Director of International Development at Lion Travel, to discuss the state of travel industry in Taiwan. I'll see you on Macroview Television.
Welcome back. Let's find out what cultural events are happening around Taiwan. And that concludes today's Inside Taiwan. I'm Melvin Tim. Thank you for watching. Please tune in again tomorrow. Take care.
由侨界第2代、第3代组成的香港侨界社团联会青年委员会，在团长李文俊率领下，一行26人来台进行4天的商务文化之旅。下飞机第一站就来拜会侨委会，受到副委员长吕元荣热情接待。会中，吕副委员长亲切地分享求学时期钟爱的香港流行歌曲，还当场秀了几句广东话，立刻拉近彼此的距离。由于港侨联会青委会在台湾、大陆、港澳两岸4地都相当活跃，与台湾有深厚渊源及良好关系，对于促进经贸文化、青年交流方面贡献很多，因此团员中有很多人也经常往来台湾、香港。李团长表示，他们这次组团来台参访，除了访问交通大学、新竹县政府进行学术交流，也会进行美食之旅，希望能深入走访台湾各地，拜访老朋友，也结识台湾青年企业家，打开眼界，也拓展人脉。台湾关电视简信玲、庄建刚台北采访报道。